Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the IJA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Gayatri, and today it's my absolute honor to have with me a brilliant researcher, educator, a mentor, and a true pioneer in the field of capnography, obstetric anesthesiology, and patient safety, Dr. Bhavani Shankar Kodali. Dr. Kodali is the Chief of Obstetric Anesthesiology at the University of Maryland Medical Center and a Professor of Anesthesiology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. With over 45 years of experience, his research and clinical insights have profoundly shaped modern obstetric anesthesiology, particularly in areas like pregnancy, airway management, coagulation, respiratory physiology, and capnography. A prolific academic, Dr. Kodali has authored over 250 publications, books, and book chapters, delivered lectures in 15 countries, and created 2 widely respected educational platforms. I'm sure all of you are familiar with one of it, www.capnography.com and painfreebirthing.com. Beyond his groundbreaking work, he is a passionate educator and mentor, having guided countless residents and fellows over the decades. His contributions have earned him numerous accolades, including the 2023 Teacher of the Year Award from the Society of Obstetric Anesthesiology and Perinatology and the Mackenzie-Imlay Mentoring Prize from his department. With a career defined by innovation, mentorship, and clinical excellence, Dr. Kodali continues to lead and inspire in the advancement of obstetric anesthesiology worldwide. It's a privilege to have him here with us today to share his incredible journey, insights, and expertise. Dr. Kodali, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And I thank the IJA team, of course, for having considered me for this interview.
So, Dr. Kodali, you're down in India now for various scientific meetings. Now we're at GAG. Next week you're going to be there at RACE. So, what elements make a scientific meeting truly worthwhile for you personally?
So, any scientific meeting for that matter is a learning seat, to tell you in one sentence. Now, although I come here, to give lectures, I take a lot of information. Sometimes it's the new information that actually changes my practice. And that is the beauty of attending the meetings. It is not simply just coming to the meetings and talking about capnography and go. I also listen to what others have to say. And that is very critical. And it also gives some ideas of trying something novel. Like today we went through so many things about what are the new gadgets that are coming and how it is going to change our anesthesia practice. So we start thinking about that. But one important thing, as I always say, is every scientific meeting gives you a lot of information. And some information would be useful to change our practice.
So could you think of some experience, some learning in a scientific meeting that has truly impacted your practice and research?
True. See, way back, I should say in late 90s, Dr. Malampati actually published his paper in mid-80s, okay? And the Malampati class was getting popular in late 80s and early 90s. And his paper was subjected to so much of scientific research to figure out whether he is correct or wrong, When that was happening, there were a lot of airway mishaps that were occurring in obstetric anesthesia. And that is why at the SOAP meetings, they were telling the regional is always safer compared to the obstetric anesthesia. So in that meeting, myself and my mentor, Dr. Sanjay Datta, we thought that maybe we should look at the airway in pregnancy, because in airway in pregnancy was being looked at by a group from England. So we thought, why not we look at the airway changes as the labor progresses? That means if the airway becomes more edematous, by post difficulty in intubation, and maybe that is the cause of the mishaps that are occurring during general anesthesia for cesarean section. That is one. And another thing that gave me a little bit of insight was, as the regional anesthesia was getting popular, they were using different types of local anesthetics. And they were also using different concentrations. But all of them were using continuous mode of local anesthetics, meaning they were giving 10 ml per hour or 15 ml per hour. So I thought about it, and one day, coming back to our labor analgesia floor, I was sitting with one of my residents. I told him, look, we are giving 10 ml per hour. Why not we divide the 10 ml into 3-3-3? Same 10 ml, 20 minutes by a boluses. And let us look at the spread. So he got the bag, we put some methylene blue inside and put it on a filter paper with, in between with a pump. In one filter paper, we put 10 ml, another one we put 3.3 in 20 minutes, which is again almost 9.9. We looked at the spread on the filter paper. The spread was much better compared to the slow tickling 10 ml. So that is what we converted into a small study which we presented at the SOAP the next year or the following year. And that is the fundamental basis of the so-called the PCEA or PIEB, the programmed intermittent epidural boluses, which are currently used. So sometimes you do get some ideas and little bit of, help from our residents who are enthusiastic. We can make things. So this is a simple bench experiment, and which changes our clinical practice.
I'm so impressed by the fact that you come in a scientific meeting and then you listen to what people are doing, and then you go back and try to put those things that you see others do into your practice. And so that shows the kind of brilliant research mind that you have. So I want to go back now to your past. So when you look back at your anesthesia journey, do you remember a particular point where you felt your research mind was, suddenly, started functioning, or was it a process?
So first of all, I'm not a born researcher. Okay, I'm just like a normal anesthesiologist. All right, and my entry into the research was very accidental, and that is probably, I think, if you are intuitive to figure out why things are this way, you will come up with the ideas. So when I went to Barbados, I went to the library. There was anesthesia journals from UK. No one has tested those journals. If you look at the fingerprinting, that only the librarian fingerprinting will be there. We'll put the journal. So I pulled the latest journal and I was reading. In one of the papers that caught my attention was, the Bain anesthetic system.
Yeah.
They were using for general anesthesia. And they said that you have to use 120 ml per minute per kilo of flow in order to maintain normocardia of pregnancy, which is 32. So that was their conclusion. Fortunately, at that time, in Barbados, the universal circuit was Bain circuit. For children, adults, everyone is Bain circuit. And we use only 100 ml per kilo per minute on the Bain circuit. And there were instances where we had to do blood gases. I did the blood gases. And I remember vaguely that the values were 32, the PaCO2. So when I read that paper, I went back to our blood gas register where every blood gas was entered. I looked at those values. They were all like 30, 32. So I said, ours, we are using 100 ml. Why are they using 120 ml? So when I went back into the paper, they did not measure the arterial CO2. They measured the end-tidal CO2 and assumed that the arterial CO2 will be higher by 5 millimeters like a non-pregnant values. So then I thought, maybe the difference, the end-tidal to arterial difference in pregnant women is completely different than the non-pregnant. So I took this thought, but there was no capnography in Barbados. So one day I was in deep thoughts about thinking what to do and looking at a big ship that was anchored in the harbor. We can see the harbor from the room. So one of the senior anesthesiologists in Barbados came to me, asked me, why are you in deep thoughts? I said, this is the paper I read. I want to measure the end-tidal CO2. So he said, okay, come with me. So he took me to a room. There was in the corner Siemens Servo 900C ventilator, completely covered with a blanket. Okay? And that had the capnography. But it was an ICU ventilator. So that led to, I looked at the manual and it said that with little modifications, you can use this for anesthesia ventilator. That means you can get the anesthesia fresh gas flow into this ICU ventilator to drive into the patient. So I went to our biomedical engineer was there, a nice man. So I asked him, this is ICU ventilator. You have to open this, do some conversion inside, and then we can use it in the... He did it and it worked. So that is using that ICU ventilator converted to supply the anesthetic gases with the inhalational oxygen, nitrous oxide, whatever it is. We were able to publish 3 or 4 studies actually. So that is the first time we were able to demonstrate that the end-tidal CO2 reflects the arterial CO2 in pregnant patients. So now that explains why that paper that came from England had to use it. Subsequently, we did a study with the Bain anesthetic circuit with 100 ml per kilo per minute and did the arterial gases, and they were 32. So that concept of end-tidal reflecting arterial CO2 was my entry into capnography. And that's why I say it is completely accidental,
So you say that your entry into research was accidental, but do you remember anyone in your growing up years in anesthesia, any mentor, any teacher who, put the spark of inquisitiveness in you about anesthesia and research?
No, in the anesthesia and research, it was not, no one put anything into my mind, but what happened was I did MD anesthesia at JIPMAR, and it's a requirement that you do a thesis. And my thesis was, you won't believe it, pulse oxygen saturation measurement during anesthesia for hernia surgery. Okay. And my second person who was MD anesthesia, his was post-operative oxygen saturation after hernia surgery. So same patients, 2 projects. Okay. That was the idea of our Professor Bell at the time. And how did we measure the pulse oximeter? We took an arterial sample, did the optical oximetry. So you put it in a tube and then put it and use there's the optical system that measures and gives you the oxygen saturation. So we did it. Not that we have to, this research was done because the University of Madras requires every MD candidate to know the basics of research. Not that this is how a research is done, you collect the data, you write all the time. Actually, Professor Bell sent this to British Journal of Anesthesia. He sent it in 1983, because we finished in 81. You know what the British Journal of Anesthesia editor wrote? Pulse oximetry, the oxygen dissociation curve goes this way. So pulse oximeter will read 100, but your oxygen tension will be very high. So it will not be a good, monitoring device during anesthesia. That is what his letter, they rejected the paper. Okay. What happened 4 hours down the road? When the Nelco pulse oximetry came, it changed the entire, the way we do anesthesia now. And of course, at the same time, 84, 85, as I mentioned in the today morning lecture, the Harvard came up with the Harvard standard of monitoring, which included pulse oximeter. So one of the things that is why when I review papers, before I reject something, I have to absolutely clear that I have enough knowledge. I'm grasping all the information that was submitted in that paper by the researcher is incorrect or it's not valid. But to give you a second example, when the World Anesthesia Conference was in Washington, D.C., I think it was 82 or something, 5 anesthesiologists were asked to see if capnography should be used in our anesthesia practice. 3 out of 5 said no. Okay? Holland is the first country to introduce capnography into clinical practice in 1978 as a standard. And then what happened down the road in 4 to 5 years? They became a standard. That is why I have learned from these 2 things that we have to be extremely careful before we say that, no, this is not going to. And that concept actually I use whenever I review papers for any journal.
Did Dr. Bell then write back to the BJ?
In fact, Professor Bell, after he left JIPMER, was the superintendent of Safdarjung Hospital in Delhi. And when I went to Delhi, I went to his office. No, he was already, Safdarjung Hospital, so he was already very busy. I asked him, sir, what about that paper? And he said, "Arey bhai, wo kidhar hai, kisko pata?" But that was so whenever I see my thesis, which is bound volume, I have it with me, I always remember how Dr. Bell thought that we should do pulse oximetry in those cases.
That's so interesting. Dr. Kodali, you remember we met in a leadership summit a few years back. I think it was somewhere around 2017, and we were all made to narrate stories of challenges in our lives. And you happened to mention during that time that you moved to the United States at 40?
Almost.
Yes.
39 plus.
And so you moved to the US a lot later in your career, and yet you went on to achieve remarkable accolades, including the National Teacher of the Year award by SOAP. And then you just mentioned over lunch today that you're also a distinguished physician. You've been conferred the Distinguished Physician Honor by the Brigham Women's Hospital, which is a teaching hospital associated with the Harvard University. So what were the key factors that helped you sustain and build on your success in a new environment? And what challenges did you face along the way?
Sure. So first of all, I thought I would retire in Barbados. It was a very nice place. We were living on the top of a hill. You see sunrise, sunset every day, except during hurricane season. Life was going on fine. But after 10 years, I was just thinking, this is not what I want. I went to the beach only 4 or 5 times in the 10 years. I'm not like a beach guy at all. But I was able to pull off some research, like I said, 4 to 5 papers on capnography and all that in Barbados. So I thought, let me try these exams. I have never written those ECMG exams. So I just wrote half-heartedly the part 2 first, which is the clinical part. I passed. So part 1, what happened was during that time, I got a British Journal of Anesthesia scholarship to be an observer at the Guy's Hospital in London. Okay. So I used to see I used to accompany Professor A.P. Adams at the time, who was the president of the College of Anaesthetists at the time in UK. And evenings I used to read the basic. And biochemistry has completely changed over 15 years. What we studied in biochemistry was completely different, biochemistry at the time. So I have to reread. I wrote the exam and I passed that also. So I cleared all the exams. Then again, it's a very accidental that I landed up in Brigham and Women's Hospital. So there is what is called as an unsolved murder. That means if there is a criminal case, it is unsolved, they put it in a television program.
Okay.
So I used to watch that. In one of the television programs, a guy shoots a woman, pregnant woman, at 34 weeks, and she was rushed to the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and they do an emergency cesarean section to deliver the baby in the emergency room, but the mother dies. So I see this Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard, in Boston. So I go through the book and see where is this hospital and all. So I apply for Brigham and Women's Hospital. I also applied for Beth Israel Hospital, which is a neighboring hospital. So they called me for interview, and I got the position I accepted the position at the Brigham. So even though I got that position at the Brigham, I wasn't sure I should move, because I'm 39 years to do this residency again. So my brother-in-law, who was in US, he said, "You don't know what you're missing. It's a Harvard Medical School. People, they want to get there, and you got it, you don't want to go." So I said, "Okay, I'll go." So I came. But to tell you, it was difficult. I came to Boston in a completely winter time. There were record snow at that time. You go in the morning to the hospital, you come in the night, you don't see the sun for 4 or 5 days until it's a weekend, or you're on a call, or you get a postcard. So you won't believe, I left Brigham back to Barbados in the middle of my residency. When I was leaving, the program director said, "Bhavani, if you change your mind, call me." I told him, "Sir, I don't think I will change my mind." So I go back to Barbados again. I was back to work there. But then I was thinking back, okay, now I've finished half residency and I came. If I don't finish at the end of the 2 years in Barbados, I will feel that I should have stayed and finished it. I would have finished it by now. So I may go into a state of depression. So in one fine morning, I called the program director. I want to come back. And immediately in 2 hours, he sent me a fax letter confirming, "Please come, your position is still vacant." So I went back and completed the residency. But once I completed the residency, there was no looking back. It was tough during that time. And I had to work with some people who just passed.
For that one.
Yeah, who just passed their residency, and I've already got a lot of experience. And when I was doing the pediatric anesthesia, in the first month at the Boston Children's Hospital, they thought I was very shaky. The reason is not that I can't do the things. I just don't want to, suppose if you do it very confidently, they will say, "Well, he's very overconfident." But when the next rotation I went, everyone thought whatever I was doing, great. And that is how you perceive people in a very, very different way. And because by the time I went to Brigham and Women's, I have already published some papers on capnography, but I never told anyone, And one day, one gentleman came and started asking questions about capnography to me. I told him all the answers. So he went, and he comes back running, he slammed open door and comes to the OR again. "Why didn't you tell me that?" I said, "What? That, you did some work on capnography and the brain circuits and all that." I said, there was no reason I should tell you. You asked me a question, I answered the question. It was a little difficult initially, but once you get to it, was like one day, one of the attendings sent me to take over at AAA. I was a CA1 resident, clinical. And the senior resident said, "I don't think this is your case."
Okay.
So I went back and told the attending, he doesn't want to give me the case. So the attending said, "Go and say, I said so, and take over the case." So that is how they perceive you. But once they know what you are treated.
But then you were also fortunate that you had seniors who kind of, the one who wrote immediately tags you, say, "Come back, your position is vacant."
Yeah.
Then the second instance when he said, "Go back and tell her you can do the case." So I think
No, as I said, once they realize your potential, it is not difficult at all. It is very easy. They really respect you. Because when I went for my third month to the Boston Children's Hospital to do the extra month of pediatric anesthesia, I was treated very well. In fact, some of the fellows who were doing the fellowship there used to come in to me. Hey, Dr. Kodali, if you're going to stay one more month here, you are going to get an office here. There's absolutely no doubt that they treat you well once they find out your caliber and your potential.
So excellence doesn't go unnoticed.
Unnoticed, exactly. But the question is, to get to that level, how much of effort you have to do.
And how much you're ready to put in.
Exactly. And sometimes, your ego may be hurt, correct? And I distinctly remember at the Mass General Hospital, and again, the same thing, we covered the night calls in Mass General Hospital as a resident. The attending will not be there. So one day in the ICU, I started propofol in a trauma patient who was euvolemic for sedation on a ventilator. Next morning, the attending comes for the rounds and he really insults me. Said, do you know about this propofol? It produces hypotension and all that. I listen. I told him, sir, you're using propofol in this country in the last 1 year. We have done a study using propofol in 1985-86 under ICI research drug. Okay, ICI Pharmaceuticals gave us under the number to do research. They did the initial research, multi-center trial.
Not named as...
Yes, at the time it was not named as propofol.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave us to do the research. So I have some experience of using propofol. I said, every patient has a dose. If you give minimum dose and you know that the patient is euvolemic, we can give it. So he finally, agreed with me. But he was pretty mad at me, thinking that I have no,
idea about what you're doing.
Exactly. So
Dr. Kodali, you've witnessed tremendous evolution in anesthesia practice over your career. And how has your approach to research and your clinical practice transformed over these decades?
So, as you know, that the first time when I came to Brigham, I had fair knowledge of capnography. This was in 93. I've already published a review article on capnography in Canadian Journal of Anesthesia because capnography is just coming. So when I came to Brigham, the way they were using capnography was you put the tube, look at the CO2, that's it. No one was looking at what is the science between those lines. How much of information we are getting from capnography. So, in fact, I was very fortunate to give a grand rounds as a resident on capnography at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. So at that time, I was thinking the technology was changing. That at that time, the internet came in the mid-90s and the HTML programming was there for the websites. Yes. So I learned the HTML program. I thought, initially I was thinking of just putting each page about capnography on the website. Then I thought that no, that won't work. We have to draw the animations to show. So I learned some of the animation programs and created the first HTML program with animations on capnography. Now, with time, the HTML is went out and the CMS program came, which is the content management systems. So I use Joomla. Now I use WordPress. So we have to change to survive on the web. And also, the current requirements requires that you have to put a Facebook account, you have to have a Twitter account. Because unless you have these two on your website, your ranking of the website will not be high. Now it is number one. If you put capnography, my site comes. Mm-hmm. It doesn't come simply like that. The number one is the number of people using, but it also looks at the Facebook, Twitter, etc. So although I'm not a big Facebook fan, but I do have a Facebook account, So, and then I have a YouTube also on capnography in order to keep the web. So these are the things which you have to learn, And if you And how do you learn? You ask people who know. So I never hesitate asking anyone if I need an information. And that is why when people talk about mentors and mentees, it is not that the mentors are the only one that guides your destiny. It is the mentees who guide the destiny. I have worked with residents who were real estate brokers. Okay? I worked with residents who flew F-16 aircrafts. And I worked with residents who were in the Navy. So their perspective is very different. So you can learn so many things in the night call. So in the night call, when things are not going, I always have some discussion with the residents. What is it? How is this thing done? And now with the change in technology, if I have a problem in using a gadget like iPhone, some program, I just simply ask the resident, hey, how to get this one? And immediately they will either know or they will find out and tell. So I have no hesitation of asking anyone if I need.
So it's absolutely all right for the mentor to be the mentee as well.
Yeah, absolutely. See, what is your whole idea here? Idea is to learn. It doesn't matter to whom, where you learn from. You can learn from a mentor, but you can also learn from a mentee. See, when they do the epidurals, etc., I watch them. Said, this looks like a good approach. Maybe I should change. So, that is how you try to improve your practice. And I give a very free hand to the residents. I tell them, look, we have established a system for here in our division for OP, But if you have any good ideas, please let me know and we can implement it. As long as it doesn't change our patients' outcomes, as long as it doesn't disrupt our flow, I let them come up with ideas, and because they are the one who are going to run the show, right?
Yeah. So, Dr. Kodali, I'm just going to now go into how you manage your time. So, a lot of us wonder how prolific researchers manage their time. So, are there specific routines or practices that have helped you be productive?
Well, that's a little bit of a difficult question to answer. The reason is when I was developing the website, I would have spent 2,000 hours. Okay, it's a pretty big website. I used to do it during my call time.
Mm-hmm.
In the night when when the case is going on or not going on, I never used to sleep. I used to, work on it. That's number one. And then during the daytime, if someone tells me something about my website, I do get lunch break or some time off. I used to immediately come to the office and make the correction right away. Okay. Now, I have worked over the weekends. Then I work every time on the plane. I used to write the manuscripts in the plane or even review the manuscripts in the plane. So I never wasted, my time. So maybe I lost few things in my life. I don't know, but, but in the end, yes, we have to devote some time. Unless you put an effort, you won't get the results. See, anything you give, you get back. You cannot put little and get a lot out of it. So some amount of work is required. Your generation is in such a great place to do research now. That is the reason why you are getting more publications from India. When we were doing research, I looked at microfilms. I looked at the journals in the library. Take down on cards what each paper said. Then you write the manuscript on a piece of paper and pencil. Then you do the final thing, and then you do the type. When you type, you misspell it, you have to type the whole page. So it's a lot of, but nowadays it is so easy. See, if someone calls me for a lecture, what I do first thing? I Google it. What is it new in this subject now? And then go from there. So you're in a very good place to do things because your literature search is easy. Most of the, references, you can get it. Majority of them are free. Institutions pay for the, pay for the journals now. So, and the ideas are floating. So it's very, very easy to do research now compared to what was.
My next question to you was going to be this. So, the young anesthesiologists of today have different tools and opportunities. So, you said that literature search and things have become easier. What do you wish had been available to you during your early career other than the easy literature search? Anything else that
No, I think at the time probably I was very fortunate to have a very good mentors. Actually, as I said, at every place, Professor Kandle was there at Jipmer for me, and then we had Professor Mosley in Barbados. He was not a researcher, but he helps for me to do the research.
Mm-hmm.
He will take away all the hurdles for you,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good thing. Then when I came to Brigham, I had Sanjay Datta, who was my mentor, and then Dr. Simon Gelman, who was the chair at the time. And actually, because of Sanjay Datta, I did the obstetric anesthesia, fellowship. So, I was fortunate that I had some people to give me some ideas or facilitate my research, which is, the first research when I was doing, we needed to do the airway photographs. And as a resident, I won't have money, right? And it was Dr. Datta who actually got the funding because he was going around the world lecturing and he was getting some money. So he actually sponsored all the photography equipment and things like that. So in that way, I was very fortunate. And particularly at Harvard, one thing was very good, very knowledgeable in their, in their field. You go to anyone and ask a question, they will really explain to you in much more detail than what you want. And I'll give you some examples. Jim Phillips, who has got a gas man program, he was a biomedical engineer at Hewlett Packard. He did later MD. Then he did his anesthesia residency. Then he joined as a director of Brigham and Women's Hospital. So when you see all those people, you get really, stimulated.
Yes. So when you, I want to ask you, you were talking about your capnography days, right? And I remember, I think at some point your email ID was also capnoman@gmail.com.
Even now.
Even now, yeah. So when you look at modern capnography and its advanced applications today, does it feel like watching a child you have nurtured grow beyond your initial dreams? And what aspects of its evolution today make you particularly proud?
No, absolutely. First of all, I never thought that the capnography will survive so long. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And initially now I finished 25 years on it. 25 years of free education of capnography to everyone. And almost about 1,000 people see that site all over, to learn the basics of capnography, including these business people. So it's very strange. They call me and say, do you think the side stream capnography is better or the mainstream capnography is better? I said, so I used to answer. Then in the end, why are you asking me this? Are you an engineer? No, we want to do some investment of money in the company. Yeah. So it's fascinating too, So, and one day I got a call from the NASA, their Air Force thing. They said, we want to measure end-tidal CO2 in a helmet because the pilots, when they go so fast up, they'll pass out if their CO2 goes down. Yeah. When the CO2 goes down, there is cerebral vasoconstriction and the blood, the blood flow will decrease. So how to measure, end-tidal CO2 within the helmet? So you get very, very interesting things. Now, to ask why I feel a little bit proud of one thing is, way back in late 90s, when we know that CO2 is a very good predictor of cardiac output. Okay? So if I went and told the ACLS people that we must monitor CO2 to figure out they're getting cardiac output during CPR, they may not agree. Whereas I know that they took about 10 or 12 years Now they made it so-called mandatory to do waveform capnography during every CPR. This is what I thought 20 years ago, but now it has become, a reality.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to wait for the people. Like today, Adrian Gelb has showed one picture. It took about 6 years for the capnography to be used by the clinicians because, in one way, the clinicians are hard nuts. They won't change that easily. So we have to be flexible. You cannot be rigid. If you are inflexible, you cannot progress. If you are flexible, there is a very good opportunity for anyone to progress.
Yes. So that is, I think, one thing that kept repeating in everyone's slide today during the Anesthesia Patient Safety Forum. The one thing that comes in the way of patient safety, one of it was resistance to change. Right. So, and that's
resistance to change is not good for us. First of all, what happens is when we become an experienced anesthesiologist, we get some sense of arrogance with us, saying, look, I have done this for 40, 50 years. So, why should I change now? But that is the big problem. You have to always open to suggestions. You have to always open to learning. You have to always open to change your practice as required. And all the time, you have to think, is my practice or the practice under my leadership is current when you compare to the other institutions? And is the practice under my leadership is as safe as it can be?
So, Dr. Kodali, with all your experience in obstetric anesthesia, what excites you about the future of this subspecialty, if I may call it? And are there any particular challenges you hope that the next generation will solve?
So, for a very long time, I was thinking, I cannot do this. That's why if someone can develop an app on an iPhone or an Android phone to monitor the fetal heart rate for a pregnant woman. Okay, that's number one. Number two, if someone can develop the fetal oxygen saturation non-invasively without rupturing the membranes or putting the thing, that would be a game changer for us to avoid unnecessary cesarean sections. And the third thing is, if someone can develop a local anesthetic with only sensory block and no motor block, okay, that would be great for labor. Not good for general surgery, because general surgery you need relaxation, but it would be,
I'm hoping that the listeners right now are taking a note on that, and so that the future generation can sit and, work on these questions that you've given. So for young anesthesiologists who might be hesitant about pursuing research alongside clinical practice, what would you say to encourage them?
So there are two groups of anesthesiologists. There will be some group of anesthesiologists who want to be clinical. They will take all the advice from you. They will take all the advice from me. They will do a very good clinical practice, but they don't want to do anything but research, which is fine. There is another group of people who are in academic. For them, it is very important that they have to have a research component to the academic. If someone is an academic, they must have a research, because without research in an academic path will not lead nowhere, actually. I mean, you'll be just, teaching and thing. But that is where I always, some of the residents come to me and say, this is what I'm going to do. I ask them, look, if you are coming to academics, then you also must do some research. You must also think of research. Sometimes it's not that you have to do, some very big research and change the whole, brand new things. But sometimes a simple research can become a great thing. What about Dr. Malampati's classification? It was a simple study. Before 1984, not that we never saw the airway. We all saw the airways. We all asked the patient to open the mouth. But Dr. Malampati simply came for a communication classification. And that classification has a relationship with difficult intubation. That is a simple thing. And it has changed our clinical practice all over. So sometimes you start off simple, we don't know what the outcome would be. So that is why I say, if someone is in an academic career, they must also have some research comp. But the people who want to do completely clinical, that's fine. That is their choice and that is how they should.
So as someone who's contributed immensely to academic anesthesia, do you have any words of, advice for departments who are trying to build a strong research program?
Yeah. So any academic department, if they want to prosper, they have to have a research wing. Research wing will need two things: funding. Second thing is time. So every academic person must have at least one non-clinical day in a week or something like that built into our system, okay? Which is a paid thing. That day they should utilize for teaching, getting new methodology of teachings, or pursue their research. So this is a great question, because one of the things the people complain, to us is, I don't get any non-clinical time, so how can I do this research? In fact, our current department chairman is also thinking of giving actually one non-clinical day, in a week, so that they can pursue research. If the department thinks it's an academic department, then they must have some sort of a provision for this. Otherwise, the success will be very different.
Yes, I think it's really true. What you said is very correct, because when I was doing my fellowship in pediatric anesthesia, our post-call days were, we never used to get, unlike in India, post-call days. Our call days are not so busy. So there were days where we wouldn't have any calls at night. So the post-call days were our academic research days. And if we had a busy night, we were allowed to take our time off on that day as well, which I felt a really good thing to do, because we could then concentrate one full day on some research or audit work that we were doing.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, Dr. Kodali, I'm just going to slowly start concluding. You are someone who's been associated with patient safety, right? With your work in capnography and airway changes in pregnant women, and a lot of other work that you've done in obstetric anesthesia. How can anesthesiologists maintain a high standard of care while working with varying levels of resources and technology? Right? Because it's not always available. Technology and resources are not available to everyone.
Yeah. So that's an important question. That is why I said the society, first of all, society has an obligation to us. That means the society should make certain rules and regulations to us, so that I can pursue with the hospital and say that, look, this is what our society is asking us to do the cases under this kind of monitoring, so that they can spend whatever the resources are. No one is going to spend money without any reason. Okay? So, and safety is never considered, and when it comes to the financial things, because they always think about what is coming, what is going. They never think the safety factor. And this is where the anesthesia society comes into play. That is one. The second thing is, with the low resources, you have to actually get whatever you can, within the system, and try to play with it. So I completely understand your point is if there are no resources, no one is giving, what are you going to do? And that is problem with many of this, I think many places also. For that, the only way we can come out of is with the help of the society. And that is why today morning, when I was having discussion after my lecture, I was telling them, I saw the new ISA guidelines. They said highly recommended. I said, if you say highly recommended, that means not mandatory. It is not a standard. So don't say standards. So if you say that in the next 5 years, the society is considering to make it as a standard of care in order to, make our anesthesia as equivalent to anywhere in the world. Because we're all telling that India is going to become a developed country. So in that process, this is also a part necessary, right? You have to also bring up your standards. So give 5 years and say that in 5 years' time, this will become a standard so that people will have time to work on it. Because no one is going to give money just because we are going to ask for it. So why? And also another thing very important is all the members of the department or all the anesthesiologists should be in unison. If you want something, a monitor to do a case and I do without it, that's not good. And that is one of the things I learned during my lectures and going, and talking to the people. So that is why the society is a great place.
And what you said about developing a culture of safety at your workplace.
Yeah.
Where you and I both insist on
Exactly. That is why I said, look, if the society is not still in a place to give us the regulations, within us, we have the authority to. Suppose if your department or a division says, this is how we are going to do the cases. This is how our standards are. These are the standards. That's it. And the next institution will see automatically they will also try to match up. Oh, that hospital is doing a great thing by doing. So let us also do. And I'll give you a simple example. The EEG monitoring during anesthesia. EEG monitoring during anesthesia is not used in the main operating rooms in our institution. Okay? They don't use it there regularly. But in labor and delivery, because I'm the division chief, it is mandatory. I tell them that you have to use EEG monitoring for all general anesthesia cases. Cesarean section, D&Ds, whatever it is mandatory to use. I tell the residents, you have to use it here. So, because this is my jurisdiction, so I want to maintain the standards. Now, why I insisted? Because I'm Boston trained. In Boston, all institutions use EEG to prevent the awareness. So that is so you have to adapt to within your rulings, you can do it.
Thank you, Dr. Kodali. It was a wonderful experience talking to you and sharing your journey in anesthesia and research. As a parting word, do you want to give any words of wisdom to the young anesthesiologist who is listening to you right now?
So as I said, young anesthesiology is in a very good position to learn. There is a lot of technology for them to use. But one thing they should always remember, basics are basics. If the monitoring machines are not working, put a hand on the pulse. Okay? At least the pulse check. So those things we should never forget. And within your scope, try to contribute as much to the specialty, because the growth of specialty is dependent on the individual person. So if all individual persons put something, then it becomes a cumulative growth to the society.
That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Kodali. Thank you so much to all you listeners. That was Dr. Bhavani Shankar Kodali, who was otherwise famously known as Capnoman. I request all the youngsters who have not yet visited his website. I'm sure there's no one who's not visited his website. You must go and have a look at www.capnography.com. It's a fantastic website that gives you good learning on the different types of capnograph waveforms, and it's a really good learning website. Until we meet again, stay safe and stay curious. Thank you.